Happy Diwali.
Happy Diwali to
We,
you also.
yeah, thank you. So I'm going to be completely open and honest. We did this conversation, part of it. It's going to be different, but we did it already, and I forgot to press record. So that happens. So I started and then I got distracted and I didn't press the right button.
Mm.
And it will be a different conversation the second time round. And I want to be clear that it is a second conversation. And I also want to be clear, there's a few things that I discovered in the first conversation. And as Archana was asking the questions,
Mm.
and I might refer to those and say, this is what I realized today, but it won't be, I'm realizing it in the moment, which is a shame, but that's how it goes. Clearly, detail, not my strength. So, two things we want to do before we go into what today is about, which is biographies. And I'm going to start with my biography in the stages. One is for Archana to say a little bit about Diwali, because actually it links beautiful with what we're going to do. And then also for Archana to say, because she does that best, I think. Detail again. You can do detail and broad picture. I find the detail harder. To say a little bit about how, if you were interested in your stage of development, what are the options about finding out about that?
Okay. So first of all, happy Diwali, everyone. Today we are celebrating Diwali, and the meaning of Diwali is literally light, bringing light in the world. Deep, it's actually called Deepavali. So Deep is the light, and it's a festival of light. And the way I interpret is first of all spreading light wherever we are and dispelling the darkness. But also the other meaning is looking for the darkness within us and doing the inquiry, reflecting and dispelling that darkness if we can. The other also very beautiful way I look at it is connecting with everything around us, everyone and everything around us, through that visualization of a bright light burning within all of us. So I see that light burning within me and I connect with the light, say for example within Sytske and all of you around me, and that's one of the guiding lights for me. So for me, Diwali is a very important festival, and that's what we do. Traditionally, homes are decorated. Every house will be lit up as a bride tonight, and there will be firecrackers in places where it's allowed, and there will be people meeting each other and sharing gifts, and do also performing some religious rituals as well in a lot of houses. So that's what's going to happen today, and I'm just waiting for my family to come home, and we'll do all those things.
Mm.
Yes.
And I really love that image of, looking at ourselves and reflecting that light within. And then there's basically two schools you've already spoken about
Yeah.
in this work. Within those two schools, there are different scholars also at work. So what are the two instruments that would be available?
Okay. So if you want to find out your stages, in last episode we took you through 7 stages given by Bill Torbett and 5 given by Robert Keegan. And I'm just mentioning these two scholars. There are many, many scholars, and we would love to acknowledge them, of course, but these are the two main ones through which we'll be talking. So how to find out the stage that you are at? Bill Torbett's, actually they do the test through, it's called STEM. So it's a Washington University sentence completion test. There are 36 sentences given to you, and there are only half complete, and you complete the rest, whichever way you want to. There are no guidelines or no word limits. You can just look at those questions and you write. Some questions will be I am. So the way you write I am tells us about how you see yourself. Or my mother and I, it's about your relationship between your mother and yourself. My father and I, when I'm criticized, when people talk about sex, I find that very interesting what people write in that. Or poverty. They also talk about poverty or crime. And so we go through a number of things, our emotions, the way we reflect about the world and the way we think about our relationship. These are all comprehensively captured in those 36 sentences. Once you have finished your sentence, then there will be a specialist who are trained in looking at those STEM sentences, and they will analyze that, and they'll do a debrief, and they'll explain to you which stage you are at. Sometimes we are in a stage, clearly in a stage, and sometimes we are transitioning. So because it's human nature, we can't actually capture that in a box or in a label. We are constantly moving. When I say constantly moving, it's not days or months, it's years I'm talking about. So from one stage to another, usually if our environment is good, it takes about 4 to 5 years without any intervention. And then if you are really hell-bent on moving from one stage to another, there are some programs where they do interventions, and they also kind of do some more expedient work, I believe. And Robert Keegan's idea is to see this development through subject-object relationship. So when we move from one stage to another, what was subject for us becomes an object. So for example, at one stage, if we are subjected to our relationship, if we are completely merged with our relationship, then that is a subject. And then when we move to the next stage, we begin to see is like, this is how I am in my relationship. So then we begin to have relationship. I am not my relationship, I have relationship. So like that. So then how we find out, we do a comprehensive interview with you. We'll give you some words to reflect on, like success, like sorrow, loss, or what moved you. So those are some of the words. There'll be 10 cards given to you. You'll reflect on them, and then we'll take you through a rigorous interview. You'll answer the question, and then what we literally try to find out is what is subject for you and what has become object for you. So based on that, we'll determine your stage. We'll do the analysis, we'll do a debrief, and then we'll also give you your stage. For Robert Keegan, to go through these 5 stages, there are 5, but there are actually 21 sub-stages. So it's quite a finer sort of nuance-based analysis, and we can tell you exactly which stage you are. And why that's important is because you know your journey, and then you will also see your potential if you're interested in that. So that's how we do the testing.
Thank you. And maybe I think in the center, or I know because I've just seen them again doing a GLP debrief, some of the sentence stems you mentioned are not actually in the
Okay.
GLP, the Torbert work, because they have some other stems which are
Right.
more business and leadership directed.
Yes, yes.
So the one about sex, for instance, I was like, I don't think I've seen that.
That was
Um,
in Suzanne Cook-Grutter. So that
yeah,
was
that's in
Washington
Vancouver.
University.
Carter.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
great. So
Yes.
are you ready to interview me again?
Yes. So today is Sytske Casimir's interview, the big interview I had been waiting for, because I would love to know her journey, and for all our listeners, and to give you a really good caveat right at the beginning. So Sytske's journey, according to me, who is a researcher and who has done a lot of research in this field, has been more of an advanced stage. So she is assessed at a very advanced stage in this journey, and she has been going through these stages earlier than a conventional population would go. So that's what I can say. So when we are talking about it, and when she talks about her stages during school and college and also early work, for a normal population, it's a little bit later in life. So just a caveat there. And with that, I'll start interviewing my friend Sytske. So as we had mentioned, so today we are talking about Bill Torbert stages, and we'll start with the opportunist stage. And as you would remember, opportunist stage is all about surviving, and the main concern is not being caught. We are not concerned about the rules. We are not concerned about relationships. We are only concerned about seeking and seeing an opportunity, latching onto them, surviving at all cost, and just be careful to be not caught. So Sytske, tell me if you remember when you were at the opportunity stage and what happened.
So the interesting thing was I thought about it all week. I couldn't think of anything until I was sitting here, and I thought I was just too young, so I can't remember. And all of a sudden I had this example in my head, and it's actually one I'm quite ashamed of. And I was for a moment thinking, am I going to share that? But I did. So I'm going to do it again now with the video. Um, So yeah, I can't remember how old I was. I must have been going to school, I think, or I know. And one day I stole something um, from the cupboard, some chocolate or something like that. I think it was chocolate. And my mum caught me as I was stealing it. And then because I felt so embarrassed, I also lied about it and said that I was taking it for someone else and they wanted me, and even that they wanted me to bring that for them. Um, which then when my mother pressed me on this, of course, I had to admit that wasn't true because I couldn't have her go and figure out if this was true because then it would be even worse. So yeah, so I was really and I don't quite know why I wanted that chocolate, but I really wanted it. It wasn't actually as if in our house you couldn't have sweets. I mean, we always could have sweets. Probably if I'd asked her, it would not have been a problem. But yeah, that urge to have that and maybe to have it secretly without
Yes.
her knowing or something. I don't
Yeah.
remember that, but I can still remember the feeling um, of wanting it and then the shame for being caught.
Yes. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, normally people at this stage are just very preoccupied with their own needs, and they do not yet recognize that other people have needs also. So I'm just concerned about what I want, and the world is the supplier of my demands. And my only concern is not being caught. Just to give you examples, Sytska is talking about her childhood when she was at this stage. There are many, many individuals who are at this stage also, and and they actually struggle, or people around them struggle with that. So it's ideally it's an adult, it's not an adult stage. Normally we get this when we are very, very young, but some individuals are still at that stage, and you may find them in your life or in public lives even, and it's not very harmonious for the society or for people around them if you are an adult at stage 2. So then what happened? How did you move to stage 3, a diplomat stage?
Yeah. So I always think that had to do with I had a brother. He passed away when he was born when I was 3 and passed away when I was 3 even. Yeah, because he only was 7 months when he passed away. He had Down syndrome and a very weak heart, a heart condition. So there was a lot of time of my parents spent with him. Um, and I think in part that urge to steal something for myself, which was probably also around that time, or maybe even probably a little bit later, had to do with that, right? So I needed something, but there was also that sense of the world is a dangerous place. You never know how long you may live. For a long time, I was afraid of going to sleep, and I only found out when I was in my 20s that this might actually was a stranger at the airport who asked me, "Oh, was that because you were afraid to die?" And I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
probably." Um, so, and I think belonging to something was what gave me security. So belonging to my family. Um, and one of the memories I also have is of my mother crying when we went to see her when my brother had been born, and she was so sad and wanting to stop that. So she tells me, I don't remember this, that whenever there were visitors, I would come running with the tissues to make sure that, and I'd say, "You're going to cry anyway." So this sense of, yeah, wanting to help her, wanting to be part of something, wanting to keep the family together, which I don't think I needed to do because the family was together.
Yeah.
But yeah, that I think that's when I came into that stage. And I also remember at school, apparently my very first birthday party, I invited all the children from the class because it would be terrible to make a choice about who
Yes.
could
Yes.
come and who couldn't come.
Yeah, I think kids do that. It's very interesting to see how they understand the sense of belonging, not just in them, but also in others as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't even I mean, I was often saying I was ill not to go to school because I was very introverted. And
Mm.
so I would just need some days off sometimes, not because I didn't
Yeah.
like school. I loved school, the learning, but I didn't love school being among all the kids.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm so, but still that sense of, oh, I need to belong and I don't want to, I can't make choices. So then they all come. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, for the audience, I must tell you that Sytske experienced that while she was very, very young. But at diplomat stage, a number of adults are assessed at that stage, and you can actually identify them by their tendency to please others. So their preoccupation is just to belong at any cost. And the cost could be their own health, their own time, their own energy. And they'll spend all that energy just trying to please others and trying to belong with them. So it also, a number of adults are still at that stage. So we just wanted to tell you. And at this stage, we are absolutely unquestioning, right? Like we don't question the rules, the process. We do not question the authority. We do not question anything. We just completely there, we are in tune with whatever we want, I'll offer, because I just want to belong to you. So you may identify those people, or you may identify when you were at that stage. And then
Mm.
if everything goes right, we make the onward journey onto the experts. So tell us a little bit more about that, Sitska.
Yeah. So my hypothesis is, and of course I was not assessed at those stages, um, but at in primary school, not in the final year, but I think the penultimate year, um, I had a friend that I, always played with, did things with. She lived in the same street. And then a new girl came into the class and I was doing new things with this other girl. We were cycling and the friend got very jealous and upset that I had another friend. And so we got into a fight and she got the whole class not to speak to me. In my mind, it was 2 weeks. I now think you make things bigger when you're a child, maybe. So maybe it was only a week, but it felt like forever. Like none of the girls were speaking to me at all. And she would in class be making faces at me, saying things about me. So the girl who was the new girl who was the friend, she actually said to me, I'd like to support you, but I'm new here, so I don't dare to. And I even said to her at the time, yeah, I understand. So yeah, it was like now I'm excluded, so I couldn't belong anymore.
Yeah.
And my mother, because I was very unhappy about this, asked for advice from a psychologist, and he said, the only thing you can do is make Sytske strong. So she gave me some techniques. So ignore her. When she's making faces at you, just look another way. Or look at her, but pretend you don't see her. Sorry. Um, so I did. And that I think was what started to propel me into expert. And even as a child, I'd known that in my family, in order to belong, especially my extended family, in the rest of the family, you could belong anyway, but in the extended family, to belong, it was important to be intelligent, to be doing well in school. So I worked pretty hard in school, not so much in maths, but definitely in languages. I'd been learning the Greek alphabet. I'd read the Greek myths when I was 7 because I read all my books when we were on holiday, and that was a book I saw lying around. And so I think for me, when I couldn't be included anymore by those girls, it was okay, so then I'm just going to focus on reading. I'm going to focus on study. I'm going to focus on knowledge. I'm going to focus on getting into this
Yeah.
uh, grammar school. And so that drove me into
The experts.
expert because
Yeah.
I could be different because
Yes.
I wasn't part of the group anyway, then I might as well be different. I even in secondary school um, wore clothes that people thought were really funny. And I almost did it on purpose.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I wear a little bit weird clothes. My mum would make them for me. And people would make nasty comments about them, and then I would actually reflect them back and say, yes, that's, so I'd be a bit stand
Different.
out,
Yeah. Yeah.
arty.
Yeah. And so for our audience, as Sytske explained, from once we move out of the diplomat stage, in diplomat, we are doing completely the opposite. So we just want to merge and integrate. At expert, we are now completely differentiating and becoming, stand out. To stand out is our preoccupation now. And how do we stand out? People do it differently through different expertise. And that's why this stage is called the expert stage. So for Sytske, and because she was still at school, for a lot of people, they are now at work, and they are probably the engineers, the lawyers, the accountants, even the artists, and their expertise. So that's what they are preoccupied with, to be really, really best, to be the best at their trade, to be the best at what they're doing. And through that expertise, they drive their power, their identity, their sense of being. So that's the stage that we do. And we are now, we don't mind not following orders. We are not really pleasing people. We are just trying to stand out. So that's what happens. And then the onward journey begins from the expert stage. So we had given you ample example in the last episode as to what may happen at workplace that an expert may be propelled to go into achiever. That is, if an engineer has been given a role of a manager and they now need to think strategically. So at expert stage, we are still just kind of binding to fellow experts. We are only listening to experts' advice or experts' feedback. We are still not open to other people's criticism. We are actually not open to criticism from others unless they are the experts that we revere. So, but now slowly we are beginning to open up again, and we are slowly beginning to integrate again with more people, more differences, more collaboration. So that's now starting to happen. So cross-disciplinary work, collaboration will happen, and Sytske will take us through her journey of being an achiever.
Yeah. And so I think that really started to happen so already in my teens in secondary school, I started to help out. My aunt and uncle had made a computer program, which was still quite new then, to record scores for horses at horse competitions. And my sisters and I, we would sometimes help. So we would either input the numbers in the computer or we would run around, bring papers. So it was like we started to find out how to do things. And then we would even go to international competitions and help. And more, I started also during my studies to do this and find ways of optimizing
Yeah.
the way we did things and finding different processes and working with different people, often also in different languages. So I think I was even before I went to university, I'd gone to university when I worked at the first World Championships
Yeah.
for Icelandic horses in the data center. And there were always challenges, and it was, how do we solve that? And working with people who were a lot older, knew a
Yeah.
lot more about things. So I needed to find different ways of doing things.
Yeah.
Also, in my studies, I applied for a job at the university. They were looking for someone to help as a student assistant. I was only in my second year, but it looked like a great job.
Yeah.
I applied, nobody else did. So I got the job. They adapted it a little bit. They were looking for two, so they had one senior person who did a bit more. Um, but so I had to do things, and I was in my third year, I was tutoring people, and I was 1 year ahead of them, and I was a week ahead in sort of what I had to do. So finding ways, different ways of doing things, collaborating with different
Yeah.
people, dealing with people who didn't like what you did, not having the expertise about things,
Yes.
but still finding a way to do it, I think really
Yeah.
brought me to achiever. And then certainly that strengthened even when I went to work. And I went to work again in a topic I didn't know about. I wanted to work in a business. Didn't have anyone in the family who did that. I'd studied English, medieval English at that. So that wasn't really
Yeah.
where you learn about business. And then I started somewhere as an assistant and then went into HR and got so many opportunities to bring people together and
Yeah.
do. I used to coordinate big tender projects, making the proposal for
Yeah.
clients because I could bring everything together and think about, oh, we need to do this and that. And I love that. And I still, when I think about the energy at
Mm.
that time and yeah, there was such joy and energy in the work. And we would often in these tender projects work till like in the middle of the night, early in the morning. And there was so much
Yeah.
and we were always like, why are you so but I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think achiever stage is beautiful in that sense. Like it gives you that
Mhm.
extra energy to not just work for yourself and your family, but you're also pushing your boundaries beyond that. So you are thinking about the society in general. Your vision becomes broader. You become more strategic, more than the expert stage. You have the energy to do a lot more than other people are doing around you. And then over time, again, as we have mentioned, that every stage has its own limitation and strength as well. So tell us more about the limitation of achiever stage when you started to
Yeah.
find that, okay, I have seen my potential, I have done all these things. And also another thing I wanted to mention about the achiever stage is where we become like great advocates for causes that we are passionate about. So we also take some causes that we want to stand for and we do a lot of work around that. So you can identify those people or you can identify this stage within yourself when you are doing something for a broader society beyond your just your needs. So that's what achievers are busy doing as well. Very effective, good delegates, and yet they start to find their work-life balance a little bit constrained because of all this work and energy and constantly reaching their potential. So take us through your journey from achiever onwards.
I think for me, that work-life balance was less a problem because I was single.
Yeah,
At one point, I was in a relationship, but I thought the work was probably more important. So I
yeah.
moved back to the Netherlands. I think it was more my capacity. So I was fortunate to sort of have the pull to the next level. In 1998, I joined Shell, and 4 weeks after being there, I was allowed to go to one of their young leaders programs, Shell Life. And I was there and I thought, that's what I want to do. So that was one thing. I wanted to get there. And I was like, how do I get there? The other thing was that it challenged me. So there was lots of things that, on the one hand, I wanted to be there. And on the other hand, I was really annoyed by it. In
Mm.
fact, one of the people who facilitated it, who I thought on the one hand was brilliant, on the other hand really annoyed me. And he's now one of my dearest friends, also
Yeah,
living here
that's
in
what happens.
Australia. So I'll be meeting him soon again. But yeah, because they were talking about advocacy. And I got that, and I thought, but I always do high quality advocacy, which of course I didn't. And inquiry, and I thought, oh, but I do enough of that. But it confronted me with that realization, actually, I don't. Um, and so I think it started to get me to question things in myself, who I was, what was important, also meeting more people from different countries and different cultures. Um, and I was very lucky to have a manager who really asked us, what do you want to do? And he knew I wanted to work in that department. So he first put me on a project with that department, which got me to learn a lot. And then he put me on a recruitment drive for them. And the first person I happened to hire was myself, which was great. I'd said, I'll come to the assessment center to understand it. I hoped they would say, you can come and work for us in about 3 years. And this is what you need to do. But actually, they offered me a job. So and that really catapulted because then I was facilitating this work and people, I really wanted to do this. This was so important for me. So that was still the achiever in me, but they didn't think I was, the participants, my colleagues did think I was doing well and I could facilitate. but the participants didn't like me. I got lots of really negative feedback, like really not
Mm.
nice things about myself. And so to explore how could I hold on to me a little bit, not completely change, not start to act, but also do it in a way that they appreciated it.
Yeah.
I think that really catapulted my journey of self-discovery. Um, yeah, and then meeting so many different cultures all over the world. What's true? What do I believe?
Yeah.
How do we construct reality? How come I believe this and you believe that? And, learning about ladder of inference and all the different perspectives.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really
So it's more of
it.
an internal inquiry. Yeah. So you
Yeah,
go internally more up until achiever stage. We are expanding outside. We are doing things for others. From the redefining stage, we start to literally redefine, question how we see the world, how we understand our
yeah,
world. Because up until that stage, we don't even realize that we hold a perspective or that
yeah,
we are part of a system, and all of those thinking begin to occur at the redefining stage. So we start to see ourselves as part of a system or a bigger system, what role we are playing, what role I want to play, and just understanding ourselves. I think that's the journey. First understanding ourselves, and then through that understanding, looking at the world outside. So then you went to redefining stage, and as we had mentioned before, that this stage is quite wobbly, very shaky. We
yeah,
cannot make any decisions because everything is right and everything is wrong. A very purely relativistic perspective. So people, if we are in organization and if you are a redefiner, people may see you as indecisive because you are taking a lot longer to make a decision because everything seems right and wrong at the same time, and we go through a little bit of a challenge and struggle while we are still figuring out where we are and placing a foot, like we are sort of like floating at this stage. We are not firmly on the ground. And so that's what happened to Sytske. So take us through your next journey. How did you move from
mm,
redefining to then begin to transform your worldview? What happened?
yeah. So, and I can so remember that floating and not being able to give feedback anymore. So I would train people and they would ask me, how was that? And I was like, well, yeah, what could I say? Because who am I to say if it was good or
Yeah.
not? So I can still really remember that. Whereas before, I would be very clear, you did that well, you didn't do that well. So this was also, so I left Shell, which many people at redefining, right? I later found out will leave an organization. I was a little bit arrogant about what I could do. Um, I went on a developmental junkie journey. So I did almost every program I could go to.
Yeah.
Lots and lots and lots of programs and lots of development. And in one of the developments, I met some beautiful people who told me about, at that time, still the LDF, but about developmental work.
Hmm.
That's how I then went on a first program where I got my first score, which was that I was at the redefining stage. Um, and I think through that work and some coaching I then did with Elaine Barker, who's done a lot of the research on this tool, and I started to look differently at myself. And I realized that if I wanted to learn more about myself and about organizations, and I wanted to work with organizations, I had to go back in.
Yeah.
And I went back into an organization, which I had been working with as a consultant. I got the opportunity to work there. And and I said, and I want to work to myself with hairy problems in organization because that's what I need to learn. How do
Yeah.
you deal with that? And every time a hairy stuff came my way, and many of them did, I was like, and then I went, nah, this is what you wanted to learn.
Yeah.
Uh, I also had some personal things like I fell, I broke my foot, I had a herniated disc.
Mm.
So literal physical pain.
Yeah.
I was disappointed in love, all things that in a one way were suffering, but also really got me to rethink
Yeah.
who I was, what I was, but also, and I started studying again, organizational analysis, which gave me a much deeper systemic understanding. Um, I completely let go. So a year or so still after doing my first LDF, I was still like, oh, but I want to go to that next level. And then I actually completely let go. I still had vertical development in my mind. I had complexity, but it was like, well, I might grow, I might not, but this is clearly the path I'm on. And one of the things I had discovered was I've not been raised religiously. And I can remember, I think I was probably about 18. At one point, my mum was cooking and she was in the kitchen. She said, but you do believe in something, don't you? Because she'd gone out, she'd been raised in a very strict Christian tradition, and she'd gone out of that. But she said, I do believe in something. Um, but it's not within a church. And so, and I, at that moment, to my surprise, said yes. And I think in that same time when all this was happening, I also started to explore, what do I believe? Now, I never came to the point, which apparently is important, to commit to any religion.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
I'm more still agnostic, but I'm clearer about what I do believe in and don't believe in. But I think that really helped me to move to that next stage.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. So if I just notice the feeling, it feels like a softer space than
Yes.
redefining is like combobulating,
Yeah.
energetic also still, but then it sort of became softer.
Yeah.
Even though in that other time I was never sick, there was heartbreak, but it felt less painful in some ways, maybe because it was earlier in life. So there was
Yeah.
also the realization for me that I wasn't going to have children. Um, it was something I seriously considered. Am I, do I really want children? So am I either going to just find someone to have children with or do that on my own? Um, so it's interesting because in some ways, if I talk about it, I think maybe it sounds very negative, but it actually, there's a beautiful, soft touch to it for me. Even the spaces that were less beautiful. So the shadow side became more acceptable, both my
Yeah.
own shadow and the shadow of the organization, the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what happens when we move. And the other thing I wanted to add here is when we move from achiever stage onwards, the redefining and all of that, we are also moving away from absolutely just relying on information, data, logic, thinking. So we are moving from that, moving as in not dropping them out, but we are also growing beyond just using that way of gathering information. We are now also getting in touch with our own intuition, our feelings, our emotions, and how we perceive the world. So it's more kind of perceiving, sensing, feeling that now we are adding to thinking and doing and data gathering and all of that. So I think we are now becoming really expansive, really flexible, and as Sytske mentioned, also softer. It kind of feels a little bit softer. We become more accepting. We become more open to reality. We also start to see our own shadows. We start to see shadow in everything, and not just see that, oh, I have shadow, oh, I have the darker side, but actually accepting that every light has darkness. I mean, light exists in the context of darkness. So we begin to kind of have understand that philosophy that we have been talking about but not experiencing through these later advanced stages. So Sytske has gone through the transforming stage, and at transforming stage another thing can happen, like we may have the hero complex, because from the redefining stage we were not able to decide, and then at transforming stage we are able to make decisions. We want to propel our organization forward, our societies forward. We got the same achiever energy back, but with more strategic power, with more understanding of the system. So we feel like more powerful at this stage, and some people can feel a little bit of the hero complex at this stage as well. So that's a little bit of a shadow or limitation of this stage. But then the journey doesn't end here. Sytske keeps moving, and she finds herself at the next stage, alchemical, the early alchemical stage, mainly because the scales that the scientists have today cannot measure beyond early alchemical stage, and also people at advanced alchemical stage are so unique that we cannot form a pattern and they cannot be ascribed as a data. So each and every individual after that, there will be rarest individuals, very rare people at advanced alchemical stage, and they are so unique that they don't form part of the data, or not as yet anyway. So Sytske, take us through your early alchemical stage from transforming. So I'm very interested to know what happened, how you moved, and now that you are in that stage, how do you see life? So just take us, like,
Mhm.
focus on those two things, if you may.
So to be honest, I think I scored at late transforming
Okay.
with moves into early
All right.
alchemical.
Yeah. Okay.
So I would not put myself significantly, to say, yes, I score at early alchemical.
Sure.
I do think I have glimpses of it.
Uh-huh.
So I can talk about those because, some of my stems I can certainly write about it. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
Uh, but I think what keeps me moving, whether it's still in late transforming or moving into early alchemical, is life.
Mm.
Um, and I think so. One of the things that happened to me that has brought that online is when I found out in 2020 that I had a large tumor in my skull.
Yeah.
Um, so I had a bump on the back of my head. I went to the doctor, and the first one said, "Oh, I can cut it away." We started cutting, not a good thing, but then said, "No, they can't do this." So sent me to the hospital. Then, of course, there was COVID, so I had to wait months, and then one day I found myself in the hospital for a echo, and I could see in the doctor's eyes things were not well. He was like puzzling, and he was like, I don't know what I'm seeing. So I'm going to have to do a CT scan. And then I can remember him sitting opposite me, and then I will have to go into the books. So I knew it was wrong.
Mm.
And that was a late evening. I did not have an appointment yet with the doctor, so didn't know what could happen. And the next morning he called me 8 o'clock in the morning and said, I'm really sorry to say, we found a large tumor, a tangerine-sized tumor in your
Mm.
skull. It's not in your brain, it's in your skull, but we don't know what it is. So we're going to have to do lots of research. I've set everything up. You're going to be having all sorts of investigations, and you're going to go to the best hospital in the neighborhood, which is one of the best hospitals in the Netherlands, actually, or the best hospital in the Netherlands for this. But we'll coordinate that. And that was such a shock, of course. And I remember crying for a day. And then I felt so terrible because when you cry, of course, your eyes get bloated. And he was amazed I didn't have any symptoms. So he
Yeah.
was like, see well, can you move? And I just didn't have any symptoms. And but of course, if you start crying, you start feeling things in your head and you get a headache. And so I decided this is not going to help. And I can't cry anymore. I'm just going to have to be what is.
Mm.
And it was quite uncertain for 3 weeks what it was. The suspicion was it would be benign, but it could be malign. And if it was malign, the one variation I read about, I'd be dead in 2 years. Um, so living with that and thinking about how do I deal with that and actually realizing, and I'd had that realization years before in a meditation that I thought, I've always been afraid of dying, but if I were to die now, actually, I've lived a really good life. I prefer to be 100, but I could accept it. Uh, and I got back to that feeling and realizing that fighting it isn't going to make it different.
Yeah.
One of my best friends had died a year before. My father had passed away the year before. Um, and I thought the only thing you can do is make the most of, or make the time you've got, not make the most of, but appreciate the time that you've got and live it.
Yeah.
So while I'm here, I'm going to live it. And I think that gave me those insights. Because also, I think what happens again at alchemical, it's about being rather than, so transforming is more about doing.
Doing. Yeah.
Alchemical is again more about being. So how am I being today? And how am I being so that that's positive? And if it's negative, then how is that maybe still positive? Accepting what is, but also seeing that what's happening to me, it's not just happening to me, it's happening to my mum, it's happening to
Yeah.
my friend, and it's happening to everyone who goes through these things.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
yeah.
beautiful. So, if you were to summarize your journey,
Mm.
how would you summarize your journey so far, and what would you say to our audience about your
Mm.
life through these stages?
I think what surprises me even now talking through it, that each stage is beautiful in its own way. And you can't bypass them, but I also wouldn't have wanted to bypass them because I learned something from every
Yes.
stage. Now, that's easier when you look back than when you're in it.
Yes. Yes.
Um, so I would say that. I would say that very often, interestingly, in growth, adversity is your friend.
Yes.
So one of the phrases I've really started to use is the blessings of misfortune. And I don't, of course, I always go, it would have been amazing if I hadn't had a tumor in my skull ever. I mean, it's been taken away. I've had radiation. I'm planning, well, as well, you can't plan, but I'm intending to live a long and full life
Yeah.
and 90 or 100. Um, but I know statistically the chances are less high of that happening now than they were before I had this. Well, maybe they weren't less high now, but at least now I know statistics, and this was a very rare tumor, so statistics don't say
Yeah.
anything. But so it would have been great if that hadn't been the case, and if I was just completely healthy, like for instance my grandmother was. But that isn't the case, so I can't cry over that. And then I look at, so what did it give me? And I'm convinced I'm a better human being, I think. Nicer, um, wiser than I was before that.
Yeah.
And that it's not in spite of, but it's thanks to that.
Yes.
Um, that doesn't mean that I wish everyone to get ill but if it
No.
does happen, rather than be upset with it, can we say, okay, it would have been great if it hadn't happened, but now that it's happened, how do I make the most of it almost?
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Um,
it's beautiful. And I think, as we had also said, that yes, you said, right, misfortune is our friend. But during those misfortune, if we are supported, then we actually go from one stage to another. So that's very important to keep in mind, because there are a lot of people who are miserable in their life through any circumstance. And if they're not supported, then they just languish in that stage, right? So it's very important for us, if we recognize someone struggling and if we can give them support, then they'll grow. So I think these are some of the things that I have taken out. But very importantly, to anyone and everyone who's listening, this is one of the ways to grow also, to have the conversation, to have the inquiry, send in
Mm.
the questions that you may have, send in the reflections that you are having. And this is one of the stronger way, I would say, my practical way to continue our developmental journey through self-inquiries, to mutual inquiries. And yeah, and I think just the very idea of Sytske and I getting together and talking about our own developmental journey and sharing and bringing all of you in, we are hoping that this could be one of the ways in which you can grow, if that's what you are looking for. So
Mm.
I think that was a great interview, Sytske. Thank you so much for taking us through all the stages. And
Thank you for your lovely questioning. And just to say, I didn't have the ahas live now in the podcast because, as I said, I forgot to press record, and I did have them this evening. Like, oh, that happened, and that, and it's. I think exactly what you said. The beauty of having these conversations and showing up with each other and sharing those stories. So thank you for
yeah.
that.
Thank you, everyone, and stay tuned for our next episode. We'll see you then. I think we'll continue this developmental ramblings and hopefully bring you
Absolutely.
some nuggets and something to reflect on again, as always. Thank you very much.
Thank you.